So, I guess you've come all the way just from Mexico. So, how was that from the pit lane?
I mean, it was obviously a very special weekend for Lewis. You know, winning his 5th World Championship is an amazing achievement. It's something that only 2 people in the history of our sport have achieved before. But as a Grand Prix, I think it was fantastic because it's the first time since Monaco that we had 3 teams in contention, really, you know, on merit in a straight fight. And Max once again underlined why he's a future star and one of those special once-in-a-generation talents. And, you know, on the whole, I think the double-header in Austin and Mexico were both very exciting races. Kimi winning in Austin was hugely popular, despite the fact that he doesn't say anything. He seems to be amazingly popular for that. But it was, as I say, I think a really good fortnight for Formula One Grand Prix in general.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Lewis is a bit of a Marmite person. People either love him or they hate him.
Yeah.
But what do you think a lot of drivers can learn and new people coming into the sport from Lewis Hamilton?
I think the key thing is the fact that he delivers when it counts on a Saturday and a Sunday. You know, every human being is different. I think that's good. You know, if we were all the same, life would be boring. He gets his mental stimulation and he gets his, you know, his way to wind down is to stay busy. You know, people like us might want to go sit on a beach or go training or go ride a bike, and he manages to keep up all of his training discipline while jetting across to various fashion shows and doing his stuff in LA and all the rest of it. And at the end of the day, when you get to qualifying, especially when you get to Q3, you've got 2 sets of tires, they've got to nail the lap. There's nobody better on the planet since Ayrton Senna than Lewis Hamilton. And as long as he keeps delivering that, it's quite hard to fault all the other stuff that he's doing or to question the other stuff he's doing. And I think ultimately it comes down to what keeps him in the right mental space when he arrives at the racetrack to deliver.
Absolutely. So next year we see George Russell take on board with Williams.
Yep.
So what kind of advice would you give him coming into the sport?
George doesn't need any advice from me. I think you know, A, he's a fast racing driver. I think that's the first thing. B, I've known George for a very long time. I first met him here at Silverstone. He was racing in Formula 4 at the time, and his teammate was a young kid called Arjun Maini, who I managed. So Arjun was actually a lodger in George's sister's house. So you know, we got to know George quite well, and I've followed him through his career. And he's very down to earth, and I think that's Williams are having a tough season. They're having a tough period right now. We don't know what next year's car is going to be like, and certainly George is going into it with his eyes wide open. You know, he recognizes he's not walking into a team like Lewis did at McLaren, where he's going to be winning races straight away. It's going to be hard work. He's going to have to graft, but he seems up for the challenge. I had lunch with him on Sunday in Mexico, and you know, he had spent his first weekend with Williams, shadowing the team, and you know, it was his first time being in the meetings and seeing how they operated, because obviously he's been a Mercedes test driver earlier this year. And you know, he seems really motivated and hungry for the challenge ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're all pretty excited to see how that next year pans out. But so I guess kind of like turning more to how you came in from GP2 and then getting into Formula One.
Yeah.
How was your, I guess in a nutshell, how was your experience of getting into Formula One coming from India?
I mean, coming from a country like India was always going to be a challenge. You know, we've got 1.2 billion people and 2 Formula One drivers, so it kind of sums up the you know, the challenge involved in some way. You know, we never had a go-kart track when I grew up. I never did a go-kart race in my life, and it's only when you get to the UK and you start competing against people in Formula 3 who've been doing 10, 12 years of karting before that you realize the disadvantage. You know, they put a new set of tires on, they know how to extract the grip straight away, and they know how to drive on cold tires, they know how to drive when the conditions are a bit tricky. I'd never driven in the wet till I rocked up to do Formula 3, which is bonkers, but it's the fact. So, you know, I think coming from India, there were certainly a lot of disadvantages. I think the advantage, obviously, being from a marketing standpoint, you had a story which was different, and that helped to open certain doors with sponsors and things. So there's pluses and minuses to everything. I think, to answer your question, really the biggest challenge for any driver is that step into Formula One. There have been thousands of drivers who've got until Formula 3000 or Formula 2 or Formula 3 and haven't made that final step. And that is, a lot of it is about timing. You look at George Russell, we just talked about, he's in the right place at the right time. The market this year, the driver market in F1 has been more fluid than ever before. And all of a sudden, a couple of seats have opened up. Some politics have played a hand in the fact that Esteban Ocon's not going to have a seat, and all of a sudden George is there to capitalize on it. And it was a similar thing. I did GP2 in 2007, 8, 9, and 2010 the FIA opened up the entry to 4 new teams. And all of a sudden it meant there were 8 new seats on the grid, and that opened the door for people like Bruno Senna, Lucas di Grassi, myself, who weren't in F1. And again, Nico Hulkenberg was the same year, 2010, and we'd all raced in GP2 together, and we were able to make that step. But it's about timing. Again, in 2006, just take a step back, I'd gone to race in Asia. I'd run out of money in 2005. I stopped my F3 season halfway through. Didn't have any money to carry on. I'd actually accepted a job to be a team manager of an F3 team in 2006, and we were sorting out the paperwork for my work permit to come back and just be the team manager. And then I got this deal to race in Asia, so did that in 2006. And along the way, I met Bernie, and we started doing some things with the Indian Grand Prix and a few projects, and Bernie introduced me to Helmut Marko and Danny Baja, who was at the time at Red Bull. And we got talking, and it opened the door for me to be on the Red Bull program. Wow. And I got a door to come back to Europe. So all of a sudden, I went from doing a day job as a team manager to racing in GP2. And that's just the right place at the right time. And I think sometimes there is an element of that in the sport.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I heard Jonathan Palmer said that the door to Formula One has been bricked up, and a lot of drivers these days are looking to go to Le Mans racing or endurance racing. Is that something you would agree with, or?
Yes and no. I mean, as I said, I don't think the door's been bricked up, because otherwise people like George wouldn't have an opportunity. People like Pierre Gasly, and now it looks like Alexander Albon, another F2 driver, is going to get a chance. So there are plenty of young drivers coming in. We've got Charles Leclerc, you've got Verstappen, obviously he's just turned 20. You've got so many young drivers now on the F1 grid, and I don't 100% agree that the wall's been bricked up. However, it is much harder to get to F1 because there are only 10 teams. You think back to the early 90s, and you had pre-qualifying because you had 32 cars on the grid. Those seats aren't available anymore. And people often ask me, what was the point of Minardi, or what was the point of these teams running around at the back? And the point was to give young drivers an opportunity. Fernando Alonso, Mark Webber, etc. So I think F1 does miss that. You do miss having 2 or 3 small teams that open the doors for young drivers. And I think because of that, we're seeing more people go down the sports car route, and GT racing's got enormous grids at the moment. Sports car racing with the Le Mans prototypes have got huge grids. And you're getting a lot of young drivers who are committing very early on in their careers to saying, well, I don't think I'm going to get to F1, so I'm going to go down this path. And we are seeing that shift, yeah. Okay,
so you've been quite vocal saying about Friday practice. And is that something that you would like to see the FIA remove?
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. And Austin, 2 weeks ago, I don't know how many people saw it, but that to me underlined why we need to get rid of Friday practice. First of all, there's 21 Grand Prix in a year. Now, it's all well and good for us, whether I was driving or working television. We rock up on a Thursday morning and leave on a Sunday night. For the mechanics and personnel involved in the teams, they go on a Monday, maybe Tuesday, and they don't leave till the Monday, Tuesday. They're gone a week at a time. So that's 147 days straight away that they're out of the country, away from their families, away from home, plus testing, plus you throw in all these other things. And all of a sudden, it's quite hard. And the teams are struggling to hold on to personnel. People are thinking of work-life balance and going, actually, we could go to WEC or Formula E, do 10 or 12 weekends, earn a bit less money, but we get more time with our families. And F1's always treaded that edge of being a divorce force, but it's almost gotten worse now. And I think having an extra day at home for people would be good, first of all. Secondly, it'll be cheaper for the teams to have less running. I get there's an argument. There's a lot of fans who tweeted me back saying, well, we've paid to have 3 days of track activity, and we feel cheated. Well, I think you'll have a better Grand Prix on Sunday if the teams haven't had Friday. And we saw that in Austin. Friday was a washout. They didn't have reams of data to look at. They couldn't get the drivers in the simulators on Friday night, studying and replaying the data from the racetrack. And therefore, there was a degree of unpredictability into Sunday. And same in Mexico. They didn't know what the tires were going to do. They didn't know what the degradation or the strategy was going to be. And therefore, there was an unknown. And we had 2 great Grand Prix. So, to me, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be more unpredictable. So, if you were a fan, wouldn't you rather see a better race on Sunday than just have cars going round and round in circles in a meaningless session on a Friday? I think so. So, you could use the Fridays for other things. Make the drivers do fan events. Get a load of older cars out and do some demos. Wheel out. I do some stuff with Williams with the older cars. Bring a Mansell 92 car out and do a demo, and the fans love it. Or use the Friday for a young driver test. If the promoters, say Silverstone, are keen to have F1 running, contemporary F1 running on a Friday, force the teams to do a 1 hour or a 1.5 hour FP1 session, but only with young drivers. So they run 1 car each, and it means that the young drivers get a chance to get mileage, because now testing's banned pretty much. In season, they get 2 days. So it'll mean that all these Formula 2 drivers get an opportunity to drive an F1 car.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's quite interesting you talk about what other things drivers could be doing, and social media at the moment is obviously quite rife. And what, for example, Lewis, just not to pick on him, but a couple of times he's put posts up and then had to take things down because someone didn't necessarily agree with it. Do you think social media is helpful or harmful at the moment?
I think ultimately it is what you want it to be. Sebastian Vettel is not on social media because he doesn't feel the need to be. Kimi Raikkonen is on Instagram posting pictures and videos, and he feels comfortable doing it. I think ultimately it's about what you want it to be. I mean, I had a hilarious afternoon here in the TV compound just over there with Eddie Jordan, because at the British Grand Prix he came and sat next to me and went, "Tell me about social media." And when I said, well, I'll pull it up. And there's obviously a load of abuse. And Eddie's like another one, like Marmite. Either people love him or people think he's a blithering idiot. But I love a good troll as well. I read the trolls every weekend. You're an idiot. You've never won a race. What do you know? Blah, blah, blah. I don't really care. I'm pretty thick-skinned, and it's water for duck's back. But I could see why people get affected by that, because the people on social media hide behind the anonymity that you never see them and you never meet with them, and therefore they feel they have a right to just hurl insult at you and hurl abuse at you and say whatever they want. Quite often, if you push back at them, the immediate thing is, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I actually think you're amazing. What you did is great." And it's a funny thing, and it's I had this conversation with Eddie, and he sat there, and his children refuse to let him get on social media. So when he comes to the races, he makes me scroll, do hashtag Eddie Jordan and show him all the tweets, and he wants to know what people are saying. And he loves seeing the abuse, because a bit like me, he's quite thick-skinned, and we find it quite funny. But, actually, internet trolling and social media bullying isn't funny if you weren't somebody who was as thick-skinned as us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think ultimately it's about how you take it and how seriously you want to take it and what you use it for.
Okay, I've just got one last question. So if starting your career again and the Motorsport Days live show existed for you, how helpful do you think that would have been for starting you to getting into the sport, learning in the conferences and getting out on track as well?
I think it would be very useful. I think particularly as you know, hopefully you're able to scale the event and grow the event into getting different manufacturers involved. I think especially if you're planning to enter a championship with multiple categories, multiple manufacturers rather than a single make, then it is useful. You know, how do you choose? For example, if you're going to do Formula Ford, at the time, did you choose to drive a Van Diemen or a Swift or a Reynard or whatever? And similarly here, you know, if you're starting off and want to do some club racing particularly, do you want to spend the money buying a Radical, or do you actually think, you know, maybe I prefer a saloon car or something a bit different? I think there's a great deal that you can learn in just 15 minutes of driving one of these cars. So there's certainly value in that. I think for me, coming up, my case was a bit unique and a bit different because I followed a trajectory which was well established at the time. Don't forget, I came up at a time where British Formula 3 was the championship that every young driver aspired to be in. Today, it's very different. So I think it's what we've got here with Motorsport Days is much more relevant today than it would have been 20 years ago because you've got so many different championships. There's, you know, a kid coming out of karting, what do? You know, do they go and drive LMP3 cars and go down the sports car route for the reasons we mentioned before? Or do they drive single-seaters and try and chase the F1 dream? Or do they go down saloon cars and go down the touring car path? And I think for these options, you know, in the current era of motorsport, there's certainly huge value in what we're doing here this weekend.
Fantastic. Okay, well, look, I really appreciate you coming down. We will do a bit of a ribbon cutting a little bit later, but thank you very much.